Hello, my name is Darnelle Jones, and I'd like to discuss with you today the negative impacts of the herd mentality. Now, the herd mentality is used to describe an individual who is influenced by the people around them. The term is directly related to the tendency of herds of animals, including people, to agree with or follow others within the herd without consciously working through their options beforehand. What I'd like to explore are a couple scenarios where the herd mentality can have devastating impacts. More specifically, I'd like to explore how American politics are rife with herd mentality issues. Last year, we had to endure the presidential campaigns of Barack Obama and Mitt Romney. Now, in recent elections, these presidential campaigns have become less and less about informing the general public about what they could do for the country if elected, and more about trying to find ways to convince them to vote for their specific party. Now, there's a slight distinction here I'd like you to catch. The focus should be on giving the voters the information they need to consciously decide which political party would serve the needs of the country the best. Instead, each presidential campaign, aided by their respective wing-biased media hubs, try to impose their values on the general public and bombard them with overcomplicated information. However, it can be said that perhaps the American voters brought this new campaign approach on themselves. Year after year, large segments of the voters base their vote purely on the fact that they've identified themselves as left-wing or right-wing. So when their political party decides to support a specific candidate, they follow them blindly into battle. So it can be said that perhaps this new campaign approach is being used in the hope that the voters will get caught up in the chaos of the electoral process and forget that they can work out the options before they place their vote. The American voters have shown the country that they can be herded. Campaign managers are simply exploiting this trait and using it to their advantage. Now, I'd like to change gears to something a little bit more sensitive. September 11. 9/11 was, without a doubt, one of the most devastating days in America's history. And the government's response, and rightfully in my opinion, was to find who was responsible and bring them to justice. But in the meantime, the government had to prevent further attacks from happening on American soil. And to do this, they began to implement programs such as the random baggage checks at airports. Only they weren't so random. They were used to blatantly target people of the Middle Eastern community or people who looked like they could be of Middle Eastern descent. Now, how could such blatant racism be tolerated in this day and age? Simple. The American government utilized the herd mentality to strike fear in the heart of their citizens. Instead of separating these terrorist organizations from the countries of which they originated, the American government invariably linked terrorism to the Middle East. They did this knowing full well that they would get the support of their citizens no matter what decisions they decided to make from this point on. No matter how unjust or racist they turn out to be. So it's of no surprise that when these random baggage checks began to spring up around the country in the days, weeks, and years that followed 9/11, that people simply said, isn't security worth the mild inconvenience to those who are singled out? The American government knew that this support would lead to the alienation of members of the Middle Eastern communities, and in turn this would help them find terrorists within their borders. All it took was one inaccurate link to expose one of society's fatal flaws. The people in power have recognized the herd mentality is a societal trait that can have influential consequences. Unfortunately, it's a trait that's been largely exploited to this point. But I hope going forward that it's something that can be safeguarded and the people in power will choose to educate, not manipulate.